prosperity. And on that front, we have some work to do, don't we? When black communities are more likely to lack decent transit to take people where they need to be, we have some work to do. When racial disparities run so deep that the number of deaths in traffic crashes rose higher for black Americans than any other group in America, we have some work to do. When community after community can straight through a black or brown neighborhood, we've got some work to do. When people on the south side of Chicago who don't have cars in a neighborhood called Roseland, inside the city limits of Chicago, take longer to get to their jobs in downtown Chicago than people who do have cars who live in a town called Roseland in Indiana, 90 miles away, we've got some work to do. When investments do, in fact, come to get up in the morning and see the construction site and look at the hard hats and the workers on that project and start thinking, no one on this job site looks like they grew up anywhere near this neighborhood, we've got some work to do. And the good news is we are here to do that work, and we are bringing real resources and dollars to do it with this time. That's what I'm here to share with you. That's what we're doing today. Look, I know in many areas of American life. That's one of the reasons why it was so important that today on the South Lawn of the White House, the President and Judge Jackson will be speaking about a promise kept. I know that one of those sets of broken promises in this country has been the promise of good, robust, equitable infrastructure investment. It was promised again and again to the point that Infrastructure Week became a running joke in Washington. Of promises, President Biden, with your help, delivered a bipartisan infrastructure law with generational investments in American infrastructure. And now we are at work turning those dollars into real results for the American people. Infrastructure is not just an abstract policy or a purely academic concern. It is a physical reflection of our values as a society. You see it, you touch it, you stand on it. The good, the bad, and the ugly of our country's story when it comes to racial justice. At its worst, it can be a tangible monument to the injustices of the past. But at its best, it can be a road forward from that past for the people in the communities who need it the most. And that is especially true when it comes to economic development and economic empowerment. We are making investments right now that will empower black and brown community towns. We are empowering families with affordable ways to get to work, to get to grocery stores, to get to church, to visit family, knowing that transportation is the second highest expense for most households, especially low-income households, often even higher than food. We are working to create contracting opportunities for the black business owners who do such a good job of extending opportunity to others to send their kids to college so that they can pass along household wealth to the next generation. And we are putting hiring practices in place that will give people who actually live in those neighborhoods the chance to engineer and build the roads and bridges, the trains and buses, the tracks and the transmission lines that they and their communities will rely on. We are delivering more job training, more workforce development, better benefits, safer national wealth, so that they, their children, and their grandchildren can build the prosperity that was kept from them for generations. Now, this also relates to environmental justice. These investments mean that black children whose playgrounds and neighborhoods are disproportionately impacted by the toxic air pollution that comes from cars and trucks can live healthier lives in a greener future that we're building. We're investing in resilience so that black communities that often are better protected against any storm that comes their way. We're investing in cleaner buses and trains and ports and airports so that homeowners don't have to choose between living where the jobs are or breathing clean air. And we're taking urgent action knowing that transportation is the largest source of carbon pollution causing climate change, and that means we got to be a major part of the solution as well. Better, stronger, and fairer, where transportation access is truly equitable. And that means committing to the truth that the time, the cost, the safety of how you get around shouldn't depend on your race or your background or your zip code. Now, I have to confess, I have discovered in doing this work that not everyone is ready to hear about justice and equity in the context of transportation. That transportation is somehow uniquely immune to the impacts of discrimination and racial injustice that have affected every other part of society. Some have even accused us of injecting the issue of racial justice into the picture as if it had not been part of the story this entire time. So I want to make clear, calling for racial justice is an instance of racial injustice. At a moment like this, with so much at stake, telling the truth is not divisive, it is imperative. If a highway was built to demolish or isolate a black neighborhood, that is divisive. Fixing it is not divisive. Fixing it is unifying. It is uniting because it is physically helping to stitch together a community that was divided. And if that community was divided, that's what we're doing in the Department of Transportation. We're not out there looking for culture wars. We're looking to do what's right when it comes to healing the broken places in our country, including in our transportation systems, because the only way to bring people together is to actually face the problem and start to fix it. As a friend of mine says, sometimes the only way out is through. Fix the things that are broken. That will be incredibly unifying. That's our focus. So other folks might go around looking for what books to ban. We're going to go out looking for what bridges to build. But we can't do it without you. We're bringing more intention and more funding to these purposes than ever before, but it's going to take more than we can. It's what is expected of us by the community, and I might add, it is what is expected of us by the president and the vice president. We will do everything we can, but it's going to take your continued leadership and your continued action as well. We may have got the infrastructure law passed and signed, but the work is just beginning. And many of these dollars will ultimately be spent by state and by local authorities. And too often, they aren't hearing from the people who need to be heard, local officials, to talk about your community's needs. Now is the time to make your voice heard at those public meetings, to make sure that that new bridge or bike path or bus route serves your community. Now is the time to organize the people in your neighborhood and pull up a seat at that planning table when they're discussing your transportation future. In other words, it is time to mobilize for mobility. Department of Transportation. If you are worried that a new transportation project could impact a community of color negatively, if your small business needs help applying for a contract, if your community has a plan to make your roads safer or your commute cleaner, we are here to help. I'll just close with a reflection about when I was last here and everything that's happened since. Since I was last physically with you at this event 3 years ago, so much has changed. National life, but also people who have arrived in new ways in our national consciousness. We have lost giants in the civil rights movement, some of whom I had the honor of getting to know during my own campaign, like Congressman John Lewis and Vernon Jordan. We've also gained new, bold-faced names who were there before we had heard of them, but most of us hadn't heard of them 2 or 3 years ago, and now too soon to be Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. and what those names have in common, those who have passed out of our current daily national life and those who have emerged in it, is that they followed the lights of their talents and their conscience, and the life of this country found them in those key moments because this country needed them. And that's not just true for the famous names. That's true for everybody finding the need for people to step up, to be heard, everyone who cares about justice. This country's journey toward justice is crying out for action, and I know that the people of the National Action Network are ready to continue that journey and hear that call. I know none of us will rest until that work is done, and I welcome the call to work with you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for the chance to be with you today. Thank you.
Great. We're getting ready to move on to the next presenter who's making his way down to the stage.
Good. Are we still morning? You know, we've been doing so much. Yeah, we're still morning. All right. Well, good morning again, everyone. And I want to thank Secretary Buttigieg. And we now have the pleasure of having with us this morning Congressman Bobby Scott. Bobby Scott has represented U.S. House of Representatives since 1993. Congressman Scott has the distinction of being the first African American elected to Congress from the Commonwealth of Virginia since Reconstruction, and only the second African American elected to Congress in Virginia's history. He currently serves as the chairman of the Committee on Education and Labor. In this equity that improves equity in education, frees students from the burdens of crippling debt, protects and expands access to affordable health care, ensures workers have a safe workplace where they can earn a living wage free from discrimination, and guarantees seniors a secure and dignified retirement and human rights for us all. And we are honored and privileged to have him with us today, the Honorable Congressman from the great state of Virginia, Bobby Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Harding. Thank you for a very kind introduction, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here with the National Action Network, Al Sharpton, and all of you who are doing so much to uplift our communities. Now, I know that you've got lots of members of Congress speaking to you. And I wanted to make sure that I speak just focus on my work as from the perspective as chair of the Education and Labor Committee. Otherwise, I'd just be repeating what everybody else says, and I'll be violating that old Washington slogan that says, "Every need to say it, haven't already said it." I don't want to get into that. But you certainly can't talk about being chair of the Committee on Education and Labor in New York City without at least mentioning Adam Clayton Powell. Congressman Powell, as chair of the committee, shepherded through his committee a significant portion of President Johnson's rights all went through his committee. A major focus on the committee now is what we call wealth inequality, dealing with wealth inequality. Now, I know everybody here knows the numbers and how bad it is. And everybody also knows what celebrate the problem means. That's when you talk about the problem, get standing ovations about saying how bad the problem is, and then go home, not the first solution. Get to what the Committee on Education and Labor is actually doing about wealth inequality. Now, the first thing, if you're going to deal with wealth inequality, you got to increase people's income. Number one on our list is increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We can do that. You can do it gradually. Everybody can afford it. They say, well, we can't afford $15 an hour. We can afford, you say you can't afford increased wages. Well, you can afford increased rent. You can afford increased products. You can increase everything else. You can increase wages. And in fact, if they increase prices along with inflation, they can absorb the cost of the minimum wage. That's what the studies are showing. And you know the minimum wage is $7.25 an hour right now. Years ago, a full-time minimum wage worker, $77.25 an hour, cannot afford a modest two-bedroom apartment in any county in the United States. You know that's not right. We got to raise the minimum wage. The House has passed it. Senate's got to check in and pass it along with us. The second thing we need to do is make it easier to join a union. If you join, it'll make $200 a week more than you were making when you weren't in a union. And how about those Amazon workers in New York? Not only are you more likely to make better wages, you get better health care, and much more likely to have a pension. And unfortunately, corporations are committing unfair labor practices, making it very difficult to join a union. Private sector is unionized, and that's because it's so hard to join a union, and that's why the House passed through the Committee on Education and Labor the Protect the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, to make it easier to join a union, to make it to sanction corporations when they commit unfair labor practices, and deal with misclassification. If you're classified not as an employee but as an independent contractor, you miss out on the minimum wage. If you get laid off, if you get hurt on the job, you get no workers' compensation, and of course you can't join a union if you're an independent contractor. So we need to make sure you can join a union for better benefits if we're going to deal with wealth inequality. And we also know that the best jobs go to those with the best education. And that starts with pre-K. We've been making significant investments in pre-K. And in the American Rescue Plan, we put the United States, and we distributed it according to the Title I formula, where poverty is the biggest factor. Now, I knew I'd done a good job, but I didn't know how good a job it was till one of the guys from Detroit came and said some of his superintendents didn't get much money. I said, all that money? How do you? I looked them up. Wealthy suburbs, we're getting about $200 or $300, $400 per student in their jurisdictions. Detroit got $1 billion in Detroit because of the way we distributed that money. So K through 12. And that money was to open the schools safely, keep them open safely, and make up for lost learning. The achievement gaps went off the chart, and that money has been used to make up for that, and that's what they're supposed to be doing with that money. Also, we need to be focused budget. If we keep that going for a few years, we can double the Pell Grant. And we also need, I don't know what we're going to do in discharge and loans, but whatever we do in discharge and loans will not affect those going to college tomorrow afternoon. And so we have to deal with that. We have to improve the discharge programs. We have to reduce the interest rate. And we have to make sure that we're investing in our historically. And let me tell you something. Rahm Emanuel said that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Let me tell you something. We did not waste this crisis with HBCUs. They got more money in the last 2 years than they got in the previous 10 years combined. A lot of them got $200 million from the federal government. Florida A&M got about $300 million. Average got more from us than they did from the states. And that's Morgan State settled a 100 years of discrimination case for about $130-some million. They got $150-some million from us. So we were very successful in investing in HBCUs, and they are there and serve a specific purpose. One purpose they serve is that they're there. And just because the HBCUs are there. And so whatever your guidance counselor tells you, you don't have to believe it. You know you can go to college. And HBCUs are there, and we're going to make sure they stay there. Now, everybody's not going to college. Everybody's not going to college. So we have to make sure there's job training so you can get skills so you can make a good living. And we've got a lot of work along that whether you go to college or you get skills training, you can make a lot more money. Now, after you made the money and you get a little 401k, we've improved 401ks so you can save the money a little better. We passed several bills in the last couple of days, and hopefully people will be able to save automatic enrollment and things like that. The committee's fighting discrimination, get entitled to a job or benefits and then have somebody discriminate against you. And so we're enforcing anti-discrimination with the EEOC, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, passed legislation from the House dealing with discrimination, elderly and women, to make sure that discrimination cases are brought. And finally, within our jurisdiction, health care. This will wipe out all those savings that you will be able to accumulate. And so we're improving Obamacare, making sure drugs are affordable. We passed a bill in the House, insulin, no more than $35 out of pocket. Now, all but a handful of the Republicans voted against it. I don't know what they were thinking, but we're going to try to make sure that people can afford their medicines. Now, one that is not a middle-class family, most of their wealth is in the equity in their home. Now, we have to make sure, and Secretary Marcia Fudge is very sensitive to this. She is proposing initiatives to make sure people can buy homes and start developing that equity. That is generational wealth. Once you pay it off the house, you can inherit it, and it's there. You can borrow on it when times get tough. We're going to deal with wealth inequality. You got to deal with that. Now, so Congress is doing a lot about wealth, the wealth gap, and unfortunately, my party, the Democratic Party, just can't message anything. There's a concept in sales where you're supposed to underpromise and overperform. And even spectacular performance looks miserable. I mean, just last year, we created the most jobs in history. We had more money in K through 12 education in the history of the United States. We saved businesses with PPP, and we saved 1 million people's pensions. On HBCUs got more money than they've ever gotten. Cut child poverty 40%. We did all that last year. And Democrats, because what we didn't do, are so mad they don't even want to vote. How'd that happen? Overpromise and spectacular performance. Another thing we're running into, we're letting the Republicans get away on this inflation debate. $3,500, average family making $50,000 a year, paying $3,500 more this year because of inflation. And what do they propose to do about it? Nothing. What do Democrats do about it? Well, we got those stimulus checks they didn't vote for. Family of 4, that's over $5,000 in stimulus checks. Child tax credit, over two kids, is over $6,000 in child tax credit. That we've been able to do to help you pay the $3,500. We're also making, getting more people to work so that we can produce the goods. All of that, we're doing something. And they're just complaining and celebrating that they might win an election because inflation is bad. We can't let them get away with that. We have to point out to them that we're doing something about it. We put money in your pocket so that you can deal with this global inflation. We don't let them get away with it, and we need to make sure that you vote. Senator Lindsey Graham said that if the Republicans had control of the Senate, Ketanji Brown Jackson would not have been confirmed. But unfortunately for him, the first black woman vice president President read off the results 53-47. Justice of the Supreme Court, first black woman, because we elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and people in Georgia sent us 2 Democrats so that we could block up the Senate and Kamala Harris can break the tie. We have to make sure that we vote every time. They're trying to do everything they can to take away our right to vote. It is a national campaign left. We got to exercise because they're going to take the rest if we don't get out there and vote to make sure that we elect the right people. And so I want to thank Al Sharpton and the National Action Network for all that you do. We have accomplished a lot already in the first year and a half of the 117th Congress, and working together, we can accomplish a lot more. Thank you very much.
All right. He reminded you all of the work not only that he does, but that the late and great Adam Clayton Powell Jr. did while he was in Congress. It is my pleasure now to bring to you welcoming him to our convention for this Secretary Donald Remy. Before coming to the Veteran Affairs, Mr. Remy was the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Legal Officer at the nonprofit National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, where he oversaw all strategic planning operations, budget management, and legal affairs for the $1 billion enterprise. Cabinets, committees, and boards of all 3 divisions, and he was central to improving NCAA business, operational, and legal strategies. Mr. Remy has prior government service as Deputy Assistant Attorney General for the Department of Justice, Assistant to the General Counsel of the United States Army, and law clerk at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So, Honorable Deputy Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Donald Remy.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It is so good to see you, Attorney Hardy. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you for your decades of service to the National Action Network. This team is an inspiration in so many different ways, and certainly an inspiration to me. I also want to acknowledge Reverend Dr. Franklin Richardson, the chair of NAN's Board of Directors. I thank you for your tireless efforts. At VA, at the Department of Veterans Affairs, we're privileged and honored to serve all Americans. All Americans, veterans, and I know vets. In fact, there are some NAN members who are vets who are in this room. Let me stop and say, for those of you who are vets, if you can, stand up. Stand up. Thank you for your selfless service to this country. Thank you for your continued advocacy for civil rights. Appreciate you. I appreciate you. There we go. Veteran spouse. Thank you all for your tireless service to this nation. I appreciate you. You know, last week our country celebrated Vietnam Veterans Day. March 29th. Many people don't recognize that there's a day specific for Vietnam veterans so that we can honor the sacrifices and the service of those individuals who served in that very, very long war. Now, I want to tell you a story about one of those veterans. Army commanded an infantry company in the 25th Infantry Division. And on October 31st, 1967, just 1 month before he was scheduled to depart home, he led his company on a mission. He led his company on a mission to save another unit that was heavily engaged by the enemy. Now, after landing, immediately hit by automatic weapons and automatic fire. And in the face of that danger, Captain Pitts, he plowed on. He plowed on, because that's what soldiers do. He led an assault and overran several enemy positions. Now, I don't know if you know Captain Pitts' story, but he was taking fire from all directions. Everywhere he turned, and he went forward, his own rifle fire. He had mortar fire. He actually captured enemy weapons and used that against the enemy and called in artillery fire. And after the artillery barrage, he again led his unit forward with complete disregard for his personal safety. He maintained continuous fire and pinpointed enemy to plow forward, to march forward until he himself was mortally wounded on the battlefield. Now, on December 10th, 1968, he posthumously received our nation's highest award for valor from President Lyndon Johnson, the Medal of Honor. Now, you might wonder why I tell that story today. I tell that story today because on that day, Captain Pitt received a Medal of Honor. And he wasn't just leading black soldiers, he was leading soldiers from all races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. I tell that story today because at VA, we're privileged and honored to serve heroic veterans like Captain Pitts from every generation and those who are here with us. Now, it's our job to serve them. And that's what we do. In fact, veterans like Pitts are the reason that NAN and VA have many shared goals and aspirations. I was thinking about this. You know, NAN tirelessly works to promote a civil rights agenda that fights for a single justice standard, right? Decency and equal citizenship, economic status, gender expression, or sexuality. And thanks to the leadership of President Biden and Secretary McDonough, we at VA strive to achieve very similar goals. The President has given us a clear mission to be a fierce, staunch advocate and fight like hell and survivors. All of them, regardless of race, regardless of religion, ethnicity, citizenship, economic status, gender identity, and sexuality, we fight for all veterans. That's what we do. Every single day. And I'll tell you this, Secretary McDonough and I have made it clear that achieving excellence in delivery leverage the strength and the diversity that defines our veteran population, our VA workforce, and indeed our country. Focusing on our IDEA values, that's inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, we're working to assure every veteran has equal opportunity in accessing VA's resources. Because for too long, too many veterans who fought to only to have to fight for those same rights here in America. At VA, that fight is over. Over. Because nobody who fought for our country should have to fight for the VA benefits that they've earned and they so rightly deserve. So, you know, during the past few weeks, I've had the privilege. The first was a ceremony at VA's Fort Sam Houston Cemetery. That was back in February. And there we unveiled a new wayside marker that explains and provides historical context for the graves of 17 black soldiers from the 24th Infantry Regiment, men who were executed after the Houston incident in 1970. In that VA cemetery, and many of you probably know the tragic story of these soldiers. A sad chapter in American history, to be sure. The ceremony itself was very emotional for all in attendance. It was emotional because it recalled the lives of soldiers whose service was marred by racial injustice. 110 soldiers represented by a guilty of mutiny, 19 of them sentenced to death and hanged. 17 buried together in this VA cemetery. It was emotional because descendants of those soldiers were in attendance. It was emotional because of who I am. For me, a black man raised throughout America with deep roots in the American South. I'm a lawyer, schooled at Thurgood Marshall. I served as the Assistant General Counsel of the United States Army. I'm an American soldier. I wore the uniform, and I've taken the oath a number of times. I'm the Deputy Secretary of VA, where 23% of those we serve are people of color. It was emotional for me. I'm the son of a black non-commissioned officer who served with valor and earned the Bronze Star in Vietnam. Emotions of that day was so poignant for everyone there. The ceremony was also inspirational. It was inspirational because it demonstrated the promise of America, the progress that we've made as a nation. In fact, I said then, and I'll say again here to you all, that that opportunity showed Martin Luther King Jr.'s truth, but it bends toward justice. And those soldiers on that day got a small measure of justice. It was an inspirational moment because the story of the 24th is the story of black soldiers willing to give up their very own lives for an idea for the belief that all men are created equal. Yet another reminder that black soldiers have served, dying, fighting, dying for freedoms that they couldn't enjoy themselves. That day, I could literally see that arc. I could see that arc of the moral universe bending toward justice in some small measure, justice for all. But it also reminded me that it's your job, it's my job, it's our jobs to keep bending that arc. That's what we must do. The second ceremony anniversary of Bloody Sunday last month at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. What an honor for me. Joining Vice President Kamala Harris, so many other inspirational leaders, some of whom have spoken to you here, and of course, Reverend Sharpton on that hallowed ground. That hallowed ground, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, a battlefield in our country's fight for justice. Now, I had the privilege of following Reverend Sharpton at the podium. Now, you all know Reverend Sharpton is always a hard act to follow. I did all right. the best I could, because I thought long and hard about the message that I wanted to deliver that day. What I wanted to say, I wanted to use that once in a life for justice, words are not enough. Only actions and outcomes will be enough. We can talk, but we must act. We can act, but we must have results. And that's the message that I wanted to leave everybody with. So you all should know at VA, we are acting. We're addressing racial inequalities affecting black veterans and other historic veterans have equitable access to VA health care and the VA benefits. We're embedding equity into everything we do. We're trying hard, and we will reduce, we will eliminate disparities that might exist in our system. From mental health to cardio care to maternal care, we're finding and we're closing gaps, moving factors that cause disparities in kidney disease diagnoses among black veterans. We're placing maternity care coordinators at every facility to reduce maternal deaths, too common among black women veterans. We're eliminating credit reporting for medical debt that too often has an impact on our veterans' communities. We're working with a workforce that looks like America and the veterans that we serve. We're establishing a rural desk officer who's expert in dealing with rural veteran issues where our minority communities are. We're meeting them where they are, because all veterans, no matter their color, all veterans deserve the same. And we're also working to make sure that veterans, no matter their circumstance, no matter their identity, have full and unfettered access to that most sacred right that they fought for, that some died for, the right to vote. We're providing voting assistance for tens of thousands of inmates at our treatment centers, fulfilling President Biden's executive order on promoting access to voting. We're including the exploration of having VA designated under the National Voter Registration Act, so we can provide those opportunities and information for people to vote. We're establishing presumptives and working with Congress on the. We know that we have to ensure that all veterans exposed to toxins are able to access care, able to access benefits for the health problems that may have arisen as a result of that exposure. Now listen, I understand that there have been inequities for service members who are given other than honorable discharges, OTH, other than honorable discharges, to have faced courts-martial than their non-black peers. And that results in a higher rate of other than honorable discharges. Reforming how we care for veterans with OTH discharges is long overdue. We're going to build a framework. We're going to build a framework that deconstructs all those inequities that have been built over the level playing field that we're all working toward. We're also making sure that formerly incarcerated veterans have a fighting chance, reinstating their benefits and their health care in a timely fashion. There are over 100,000 veterans that one day will be released from prison, and we need to make sure that they. One more thing I want to mention. Just last November, President Biden signed into law a bill requiring the study of possible disparities associated with race and ethnicity in how VA administers compensation benefits and how we determine disability ratings. Now, the results of that study aren't due for several more months. But we're not waiting for those results. Veterans have lower PTSD grant rates than other veterans. So our VBA, our Veterans Benefits Administration, has collaborated with our Center for Minority Vets, with the Veterans Health Administration, with our Office of Resolution, Management, Diversity, and Inclusion, and our Veterans Experience Office. We've gotten all the experts together to design an equity assessment and analysis to identify the root cause, disability compensation rates by race and ethnicity. The assessment will also determine whether there is any evidence of bias, and will eliminate that bias in specific parts of our disability compensation claims process. There is no room in our process for bias. Now, that assessment is not finished yet. As I mentioned a little while, we're proactively seeking ways to improve outcomes for all veterans now and in the future, because what we want, what we must have, is an equitable process to ensure that every veteran, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, every veteran has access to benefits and services that they've earned. You know, President Biden said that weapons of war and the nature of injuries they inflict don't differentiate based on race. And the type of disabilities our veterans carry with them don't differentiate based on race. And neither should we. That's exactly right. We're making sure that decisions we make at VA are equitable and fair. I'll end where I started. For too long, too many Americans have fought here and abroad only to have to fight those same battles for those rights that they protected for all of us when they were fighting in America's wars, fight those same battles when they come home. That can't happen anymore. The freedoms that we enjoy, documents and provided and protected by service members across the board, as diverse as the face of America and the veterans who preceded them, those freedoms must be protected for all of us. All of our veterans deserve equal, equitable, high-quality health care, timely health care, earned benefits from their Department of Veterans Affairs. Must be inclusive, diverse, that must demonstrate equity, that must be equal and accessible for all of our veteran community, because the blessings of freedom, of liberty, of justice, of opportunity, they don't depend on the color of a service member's skin, but on the passion of a patriot's heart. With your help at VA, we're going to keep our fundamental promises to those who served and sacrificed, to serve all veterans as well as they have served us. I thank you all for listening to me this morning. I thank you for having me. God bless our service members from all across the country and all across the globe. God bless our families and veterans' families and spouses, the caregivers of America. Thank you.
All right. Making our way through the day. Is it still morning or are we, look at that, still morning. All righty. Well, you know, whenever we do our convention, we technically say that, you know, our headquarters, which is up in Harlem, that this is where the House of Justice is for that week. So it is an honor and privilege right now to bring the congressperson that represents the great village of Harlem. It is Congressman Adriano Espaillat. He represents New York's 13th Congressional District and is the first Dominican American to serve in his congressional district includes Harlem, East Harlem, West Harlem, Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, Inwood, Marble Hill, and the Northwest Bronx. And, you know, he's a fighter. And, you know, we go all the way back. I'm privileged to have known Congressman Espaillat when he was still opening the doors to elective office. So we've been on that road all the way.
Thank you, Attorney Hardin. Thank you so much. NAN, it's always a pleasure to come here every year, but also to the House of Justice on Saturdays and other days that we engage in important conversation. I think that this is a forum that engage life and death conversations. And so this is important that we have it in this setting. And I thank the Reverend for leading the charge. I also want to acknowledge the presence of my colleague in government. He's the chair, not just a regular member like me, the chair of the Education and Labor Committee a little while ago. And he's doing tremendous work in that committee. He laid it out, the efforts that he's put forward to make colleges more affordable for our young people. Daycare services, important. We can't go back to work. Women cannot go back to work after this pandemic unless we have universal daycare. We're talking about universal daycare just like you have universal pre-K. And so we've been through 2 tough years. We're going on 2 years and some months now of this pandemic, and we're trying to shake it off. But, you know, it's been like a perfect storm for our communities. And if you see the numbers, you will see that around communities. And that is so because we already knew the illnesses that we had. We already knew that we had high levels of diabetes in our communities, and that our children had high levels of asthma and cardiovascular problems and renal problems. We know that these are the illnesses that promote these illnesses. And so when COVID came in, it was those illnesses that took us out, that killed many of us. And some laid in the hospital for months fighting for their lives. Now, Mr. Scott just said a little while ago that we passed legislation to kill. Now, that's important because many seniors are rationing their insulin because it's so expensive. And so this perfect storm, this COVID pandemic, probably the crisis of our lifetime, reveal what we already knew, the disparities that exist in the healthcare system. But also our businesses got hit hard. 50s have seen a major reduction in revenue after the pandemic. 43% of Latino businesses have seen a major, half of their earnings drop. It's a perfect storm. So it shows that we weren't healthy. It showed that our businesses were very fragile. So many of them were just hanging on by a thread. Many of them got hit with this pandemic, they had to shut down. The third thing that we saw was how our kids, our children, the students, are disconnected. And we saw when they were home, the difficulties they were having with distance learning. That maybe they didn't have the equipment, maybe the mom and dad couldn't really teach them how to get on. It was a real that our children lost 2 years of schooling. That the schooling that they should have had during the pandemic was not up to par, and now we're going to really have to catch up for them. So health disparities, killing us disproportionately, putting us in the hospital. The businesses are weak, and of course, our children are having a tough time with schooling. Mental health, the mental health tsunami that's hitting us right now. So many folks weren't able to appropriately say goodbye to their parents, their grandparents, their family members when they died during the pandemic. Some of them were in the hospital fighting for their lives. Some of them lost their jobs. Some of them had to shut down their business. These are three important areas that we in government must work on. Now, we've done a lot. The Congressman Scott laid out, what we did with the stimulus check and the unemployment benefits. And we had, just recently the child tax credit. $3,500 for every child under 5, 3,000 families in my district benefited from the child tax credit. It lifted kids out of poverty temporarily. We should have it permanently. We should have it permanently. Substantial funding to try to reopen the schools safely. Just this week, we approved $55 billion for the type of business that is high-risk business economically, and they really got hurt during the pandemic. $55 billion for restaurants this week. ERAP, rental assistance. An additional pot of money was placed in the state budget just yesterday, but the original funding came from the federal government to try to help out. And so these are the things that we must do. Government must be a force of good to help people move forward. And so we must do more. We must do more to help with health care. We must break the cycle of disparity. It's not just enough to say that we suffer from diabetes, that we suffer from high blood pressure, that we suffer from fashion, that it breaks that terrible cycle. We must continue to help small businesses. We must make sure that our children, that our students have the tools available so they don't face the kind of trouble they face with distance learning. And finally, we must engage at every level that's really hitting our community heart. You see it in the street. I don't need to tell you that. You see it every day. You see the mental health issues in the corners of our neighborhoods. And so we got to continue to get the funding to help out. I think that government is a force of good, and we must continue to lift our communities forward. Now, you would think and say, we're done. Well, guess what? Tonight, we're ushering Ketanji Brown Jackson. I love to say that name, Bobby Scott. Ketanji. Say it with me. Ketanji. Say it with me. Ketanji. Say it one more time. Ketanji. God bless you and keep the faith.
All right, that's it. Okay. Oh. You want it sideways or straight?
One, two.
All right, how we doing? Yeah, give yourselves a big hand. All right, we're going to move into our panel, and who will be moderating the panel. He's a advisor to the National Action Network and to the Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton. He's also a professor at Trinity Washington University in our nation's capital. He's a dear friend to so many of us here at National Action Network, and he was also at the AM News once, so you know his roots are somewhat here too.
Good morning. You all can do better than that. Good morning. All right. Well, we are really honored this morning to be able to talk about historically black colleges and universities. Let's give it up for HBCUs. Anybody in here a graduate of a HBCU? Let me see. And we had to pivot a little bit because some of our panelists were not able to make it because of, again, the confirmation or the nomination of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, but we were still able to have a number of individuals here with us, and we're just going to move forward. But before we get into our discussion, I want to introduce the president and CEO of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, former president. Now he's the president emeritus of Delaware State University. So join me in welcoming Dr. Harry L. Williams.
Thank you, Jamal. Thank you, Hornet. Good morning. It is an honor to be here with you today, and I'm so delighted that we're going to have this very important universities in our country and the role that they have played in terms of shaping the black middle class as we know it today. We're celebrating Ketanji Brown Jackson. There would be no Ketanji Brown Jackson if it wasn't for an HBCU. Let me be clear on that. Both of her parents graduated from HBCUs. There would be no Thurgood. I represent the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, an organization that represents the 47 publicly supported historically black colleges and universities and public HBCUs in this country. Medgar Evers is part of our organization, along with York College is a part of our organization. We work collaboratively with the United Negro College Fund today because of a conflict. He would have been here. We partner together, we work together, and we also work with NAFIO, Leslie Basserville, Dr. Basserville, who is in Washington, that's going to be attending a ceremony today honoring the new Supreme Court Justice. So we are all colleagues working together to continue to support historically black colleges and universities in this country. So honored to follow Congressman Bobby Scott. And the reason why it's such a privilege to follow someone like Congressman Bobby Scott, because he's in the room. He's in the room. So when we come to Congressman Bobby Scott, we don't have to take an hour to explain to him. We come into his office and he opened the doors and said, let's see what we can do to help HBCUs. And what they have been able to do with his leadership and being in charge of the Education, Health, and Labor Committee is significant, because that's real power. As he stated, HBCUs have benefited more, he said, in the last 10 to 12 years, report ever. We received in the last 2 years over $5 billion from the federal government. $5 billion. And it's with his leadership, Congresswoman Adams from North Carolina, an Aggie, Congressman Jim Clyburn, a proud South Carolina State graduate, and the entire congressional Congress being hand in hand to support HBCUs. We were able to get bipartisan legislation passed, because HBCUs, as you all know, are located in the South. And a lot of our schools, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina, they are red. So therefore, we have to have the support of members from those different parties. We work with both sides. And we've been able to get legislation passed with the support on both sides of the aisle. But since this new administration has been in place, they have been unapologetically talking about HBCUs. Unapologetically talking about HBCUs. And not running away from the issue. Starting with the proud HBCU graduate. She doesn't run from that label. She's a proud sorority sister of the Divine Nine. She doesn't run away from that label. So people are paying attention, and we are benefiting from those successes. The Thurgood Marshall College Fund was created 35 years ago when our founder, Dr. N. Joyce Payne, that would support the historically black colleges and publicly HBCUs in this country, and to be unapologetic in saying that we support black students. And that's what we do. We are the largest organization in America, representing 80% of the students who attend historically black colleges and universities. So I get up every single day excited about I represent black people, and I'm proud of that. And I don't run away from it. I don't hide from it. I let people know, because these are opportunities for our students. We get up focused on supporting black students so they can graduate and they can move forward. But the reality of this, over 90% of our students, 90% fall into a category where they need financial assistance. Their family income is less than $50,000 a year. Some of our universities cost more than $60,000 a year. So you do the math. So when Congressman Bobby Scott said that the Congress is deal, that is a big deal. And so we're excited about what is happening in this space. But when our founder was thinking about coming up with a name for this organization, she thought of only one name, and that was Justice Marshall. 35 years ago, our founder went to the Supreme Court, and sitting in his office, she asked him if he would lend his name to this organization. And he said to her, "Why should I lend my name to your organization?" And she reminded him that he was a two-time HBCU graduate, that he graduated at the top of his class at one of the oldest HBCUs in America, Lincoln University. And then he went on, he applied as an African American. So then he went on to Howard University and graduated at the top of his class at Howard University. And then later, and she reminded him that you have been a champion, unapologetically fighting for African Americans in this country, and we want a name that is so powerful and so big, so when we say it, it will open doors. And people will see that he argued before the highest court in the land 32 times. and that he won 29 of those cases. Cases that benefited and supported our community. And this organization is designed specifically to support black students so that they can graduate, give them scholarships, internships, and opportunities to continue to thrive and be. Marsha said, "I'm sold. You got me." And at that minute, this is tell you something about this man. He called his secretary in the office and he said, "Write this down. I want you to give this organization the rights, the privileges to use my image, to use my likeness, to raise money to support black students. I'm not going to charge them one dime for using my name." 35 years later, by using his name, we've been able to raise over $500 million to support HBCU students by using his name. So the Thurgood Marshall College Fund is proud to use his name. I had a conversation here, and we talked about his father, and we talked about how his father would be so proud of this organization today, knowing that we get up every day focused on helping and serving the community and providing these opportunities. Because education is still the equalizer. It is still the equalizer in terms of providing you an opportunity to lift yourself up out of your support and you need help. And that's why we go on, we continue to knock on doors, and we continue to ask for the help. And I want you all to know, the Thurgood Marshall College Fund has been thriving here recently. We've been thriving because people have been looking for ways to support black people. And I want to say to all of you that we owed a greater debt, a major debt of gratitude to George Floyd, and was murdered. This country is trying to figure out what can they do. It put a spotlight on our community. And the inequities was right there. Health disparities, educational disparities, right there. And we've been getting calls from corporate America saying, how can we help? How can we create opportunities so students can get an education and work for companies like Apple, Google, and maybe that's going to elevate them to the C-suite so that they can be in the room to help more black people to come along. That's what we've been able to do, and that's what is happening. The unfortunate incident of a brother and Breonna Taylor passing away has created opportunities for black people to be lifted up in a positive way. We lift Breonna Taylor's name up because of the legacy and because of what we will have a responsibility to do. So I'm proud to be a part of this organization. I'm proud to be with you today to have this conversation. You're going to get an opportunity to see students on this panel and to hear from students that are currently attending our institutions right now and a former student. I'm going to my oldest son graduated from Howard University. He's an accountant. He passed the CPA examination the first time around. He's working for a black accounting firm in Washington, D.C. And my youngest son is graduating from Howard University in May. His goal to graduate was to beat his law from Howard, and his brother graduated summa cum laude. I'm holding a law school book from Southern University in Baton Rouge. My son said he wanted to go to law school, and he said, I only want to go to an HBCU. So he's going to start law school at Southern University in the fall to continue to do the work. That is our responsibility, to continue to bring up our young people and to remind them every single day that you did not arrive in this situation by yourself. Somebody had to give up something for this opportunity for you to be here. Somebody had to say something. Somebody had to take something that will allow you, the National Black, this organization, this action force, action-oriented organization. I cannot thank you enough for this work, because we need you. We need your voices. We need your advocacy. We need it every single day. And I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jamal Watson, who's going to guide us through this conversation. Thank you.
Applause, please. We now have an outstanding panel of student and alumni from HBCU, so we're looking forward to this conversation with Dr. Williams. Let me first introduce Tyleek McMillan, who's the National Youth Director and Policy Advisor for Tech for the National Action Network. Let's give him a round of applause. I'd like to also introduce next Pastor Merck, and a proud graduate of the Howard University Divinity School. And finally, we have Felivi Dosa, who's a sophomore at Morehouse, where he is majoring in business. So welcome to our town. So let me start off with a very broad. Why did you choose an HBCU? We'll start with you, Felipe.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Felipe. Shout out to my Morehouse brothers, by the way. For me, it all started actually with an HBCU tour with the YMCA. During that time, I was a junior in high school. They were talking to me about SUNYs and CUNYs. Anybody that's not from New York, those are the public universities. They're the cheapest option. But at that time, I really wasn't looking into public institutions. And so with the HBCU tour, they gave it to me for free. I was visiting everything from Howard to Tuskegee I was everywhere. But when I stepped on Morehouse campus, when I was there and I, really was learning the history, and not only just like Martin Luther King, but just all our amazing alumni, I knew that's where I wanted to be. And they automatically will help me with no matter what it was. That's when I knew that's where I wanted to be. That's exactly where I wanted to be.
Tyleek, you're a graduate of North Carolina A&T.
Aggie Pride.
And also, you are a graduate of the Thurgood Marshall College Fund Leadership Institute. So tell me a little bit about why you decided an HBU.
A&T, wow. Dear A&T, a monument indeed. So the reason why I chose A&T, I think you stand on producing pioneers as we look at the civil rights movement. And growing up, within this organization, I started with NAN when I was 13 years old. Well, here you go, say 12. Now 25, so it's been quite a minute. And I think, just being around that, and when I visited the campus of A&T, and not only the pride that the school has, but to know the rich legacy that those hollow grounds that I walk on were 1960, so we all may sit at lunch counters now, that right. Or I think about pioneers such as Jesse Jackson, who, Reverend Sharpton's mentor, and Rev being a mentor in my life. And so all that had an impact on me, and not only I have to point out the school that teaches you not what to think, but how to think. And I'm thankful for that experience. And as you mentioned, Thurgood Marshall College experiences that I've had that really teaches its scholars, to take pride in our HBCUs, but prepares us for the world. Because, you know, within this, sometimes we are on the spectrum of, you know, having less than a lot of other schools, but, you know, organizations such as TMCF and UNCF really allow us to love on who we are, where we come from, and what we. It definitely shaped me to who I am today.
Thank you, Talik. Pastor Ball.
For me, HBCU experience is social justice work. And I say it because I was raised by my grandmother in a little area called Angie, Louisiana. My grandmother was the help. She couldn't read or write. Toward me when I had a grandmother who couldn't read or write. So when I look at HBCUs, I see the same thing. Because the truth of the matter is we take our own and build them up, recognizing that we are a product of institutions that continually fail us. So when I thought, where do I want to matriculate? Do I want to go somewhere? No, you don't have any money, but here's a little something for you to eat. When I didn't have clothes because my grandmother didn't have it, I think about Miss Washington, who would say, my son has outgrown these, baby. Here's something for you to wear. So when I get to an HBCU and I need some home-cooked meals, there's someone on campus who would do just that. When I'm not sure where I will stay or if I have enough money to make sure I'm not looks like my next door neighbor at an HBCU who will make sure that I'm able to make it through. And when I want to give up, it's somebody at an HBCU who will say, baby, we believe in you. It might be hard, but don't you quit. You might be tired, but you can make it. And it's for that reason that I and my children will continue to attend an HBCU.
Dr. Williams, we see the steady interest in HBCUs. You talked about the philanthropy, the giving, but we also see many, many high school students who may not have thought about going to an HBCU who are now interested in the HBCU. We see enrollment rates increasing. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing from member institutions across the country around enrollment?
Yeah, first of all, I got to say, and that's why I got the best job in the world, because I'm representing these young people and I'm representing the quality and the excellence that we have in our community. And we get to celebrate that every single day. And when you have that opportunity to do that, it's just life-changing. It gives you this power. And to hear those Morehouse brothers stand up with pride, to hear them talk about their institution, you can feel it. Let's be clear on that. They were made for you. And so when you walk on those sacred grounds and you see the names on the buildings subliminally, that's letting you know that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. W.E.B. Du Bois went to Fisk, but he said he also went to Harvard. He said, I was not of Harvard, because he never became part of Harvard. But he was always part of Fisk. You think about that in this country is a resurgence of interest in our HBCUs, and I want parents to continue to just tell their young people that where you want to go to a place that's going to value you, and you can be yourself. You don't have to do a double consciousness to say things you don't want to say. You can be yourself. When I took my son on a visit at Howard University, he met with a student leader. He walked him around campus, and he said, you will find your voice. Think about that. Find your voice. Musicians look for their voices all the time, their unique sounds. And when you come to a place where you can find your voice, then you can grow and develop. And I can tell you, both of my boys have found their voices, and they are thriving. It's because of what was fed into them. And you can go to an HBCU and go anywhere, and that's the value of these institutions and what we have there in the legacy, knowing that people died in creating these institutions. Recently, we've been experiencing these bomb threats, and the majority of bomb threats are at our institutions. And people identify you when they see something happening, and they want to create a disturbance, a disruption. And our students kept persisting and they kept moving forward. And because these institutions and how we have we've always had this. This is not new to me. I've had people say, this is so new. No, it's not. HBCU's been doing this for 150 some odd years. This is not new. So therefore, I am so happy that we are going to continue to see this growth, this explosion that's taking place at Morehouse, Spelman, A&T. A&T, they have the distinction of being the largest growing. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that all across the country. And we need your support to continue to support these institutions because they are national treasures for our country.
Thank you, Dr. Williamson. And I appreciate you mentioning sort of the recent bomb threats, because I think it's really important for us to talk about that, because again, it shows the kind of hatred and violence. Talk about what was it like for you to experience that as a student at Morehouse, because that happened recently.
No, it definitely happened very recently. First of all, I wanted to shout out my Spelman sisters who, it was a lot of the threats happening at Spelman, and my sisters there were still staying strong, still had their hopes up. A lot of me and my brothers, we were calling them, making sure is everything all right, what we can do. Even though a couple of them did leave for the weekend, went back home. For me, it was a little dark time on the campus when that happened, because it wasn't for only just that week. It was repeatedly happening. Like the next week, they would get another threat, the week after, and then there was even one at Morehouse itself where they did close down the whole campus, and we had to shelter it in. For the whole AUC, Morehouse, Spelman, and Clark Atlanta, it was a very worried time. But the thing I appreciate the most was the togetherness from Clark to Morehouse and Spelman, and check on each other, make sure we was all right. That's what I appreciated the most, that real familyhood. And you can only get that at an HBCU, you know what I'm saying? So, but overall, like at the end, our spirits were still high, and I think that's what mattered. You can't break us down.
Thank you. Can I just say, on that last part that you mentioned, what I love about the fact of, being a part of this HBCU community is we all have this pride that we all have for seeing each other, like, mine's the best, mine got the best homecoming. Hey, shout out to the greatest homecoming on earth. But
you see that?
You see how y'all saw how I threw that in there. But we have this love with one another where we are protective of one another. There's community, because we have this feeling of belonging with each other. So we can talk about each other, but nobody else can talk about us. That's the rule.
Amen.
Pastor Ball, did you want to hop in?
I remember getting the phone call, and Morehouse showed up on my phone. As a parent, I'm thinking, wait a minute, did the boy do something wrong? Then I get the message that it's a bomb threat. And I didn't sense fear. The reason I didn't sense fear is because he's insulated amongst his own. So one thing, we're under attack. I may have felt different if my son was on another campus, because on another campus, my son looks like a threat. But at Morehouse, he looks like one of us. And so I knew there was a system that would look out for my son. One thing that's also important is the bomb threats show that we're doing something right. Let me see if I can quote Jamal Bryant. If you ain't got no haters, you ain't popping. So maybe it's that they are noticing someone like a Deion Sanders who is helping to bring more institutions and more focus on HBCUs. Maybe they're realizing that their numbers are dropping and hours are increasing and there is a challenge. Maybe they're realizing that we're producing the best and the brightest. One more thing and I'm done. My oldest son went to Morehouse, and then my oldest son, Morehouse graduate, is now clerking for Black Justice in Virginia. And all of a sudden, we've got to ask ourselves the question, are we doing something right at HBCUs that they would want us to stop? And if we are, maybe we ought to invest more in what's producing our best and our brightest. When they try to stop us, we are
so much, Pastor.
Hey, Jamal, let me add something to what my friend just stated as relates to what is happening and is putting this spotlight on us. Mackenzie Scott Basil, Mackenzie Basil Scott, I don't know what it is, whatever. She's got a lot of money.
A lot of money.
She gave to $20, $500 million. Morehouse, A&T got $45 million. Morehouse got $20 million. Cash, money in the bank. And she was unapologetic as it relates to why she was giving it, because she made it very clear that we want to support excellence. And this is the largest single person ever in the history to give to HBCUs, one person. And the dollars, and I'm going to tell you how we get money from some people. Sometimes they put a lot of restrictions on it. They say, okay, you can only use it to buy this or buy that. She said, and because we talked to her at Thurgood Marshall and UNCF both, we all had conversations with them, and she said, I'm going to give it to you unrestricted. You use, and then she said, I only want 3 reports for 3 years. And I want each report to come in, I only want it to be 1 page of you telling me what you did with the money. We have never had that type of giving that's been given to us. Everybody want to put all these restrictions, saying you do this, you do that, and we're going to come in, we're going to have a meeting with everybody. My team is not even coming to see you because you know what is best for your institution. So by me coming in and trying to tell you how to do it, it's going to be wrong. And that is why this haters are out there, because they're seeing this giving that is coming. Not only her, others have given too, but she was the one that really put a restricted giving to our institution.
No, that's important. That's important. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. I want to get in maybe 2 more questions and then, of course, open up some Q&A for the audience as well. And Dr. Williams, I want to start with you, and then we'll kind of work our way through the panel. And that is to ask you the impact that COVID has had on our institutions. We know that COVID has really devastated the entire world, and certainly the impact that it's had on our HBCUs.
Yeah, I'm going to be quick on this one because I could talk a long time on this, but the reality is that COVID played a critical, had a major impact on our institutions. It put a spotlight on, again, the inequities that exist. So when our students were told back in March, or actually March in 2020, when everybody was told that you got to shut down, you got to leave, and you have to close. It was immediately. They say everything's got to go. And didn't have money to pay for a plane trip home, didn't have money to pay for their rent, didn't have money for different things. So we set up an emergency fund so the students could have access to funds so they can get home from that perspective. And then when they got home and when they went to this remote learning, a lot of our students, a lot of our faculty members hadn't been trained in the online teaching platform as it relates to how you deliver. Where students experience lack of technology from the Wi-Fi. That might seem simple to a lot of people, especially in a big city, but if you're in rural Alabama and you're at Alabama State, I talked to the president of Alabama State, he said 15% of his students didn't have Wi-Fi in their community. So therefore, in order for the professor to grade them, they had to do this old correspondence stuff where they had to write their paperwork and put it in the mail, mail it back to them. This is in 2022. And a lot of that happened. I can talk about Mississippi, North Carolina. There are places where students had to go back to their community and they couldn't go to a Starbucks to get free Wi-Fi because everything was shut down. So therefore, we were able to the federal government stepped in. As I stated, that crisis put a spotlight on our institutions in terms of what some of the things that we currently don't have, and we're computers, students. A lot of students, you know, we take it for granted when thinking a child can have the latest laptop or whatever, and they didn't have it. And some faculty members didn't have it either. So that's what it did. It really created a major inequity that was put a lens there for our HBCUs.
Yeah, Felipe, tell us a little bit about your experience as a student.
COVID really impacted me. One year I got accepted right in the middle of the pandemic, and there was a lot of uncertainty because of that, I lost a full scholarship to Morehouse because of the pandemic. But because of the community I was and because of the amazing alumni, my whole first year was not paid. I didn't pay for it. It came out of the help of great alumni, great mentors who told me that they're going to make sure I'm able to go to Morehouse. But I was able to provide everybody in my freshman class Chromebooks, or no, my fault. It was Microsoft laptops, Surface tablets, that's what it was, Surface tablets. Our whole freshman class, yeah, look, now they all remembering that. But just that, the fact that they were able to do it, I already had a laptop. But there was a lot of other students who was telling me, you know, they were going to just use their phone and just have to type everything up. But because Morehouse started that, it helped us dramatically. You know, because the pandemic is still there, it was kind of hard to restart everything. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's kind of slow trying to figure everything out. But I'll say this spring semester is I'm really feeling that HBCU feel, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, it still sucks because I feel my junior year, this is the first time I'm going to really experience my first homecoming. You know what I'm saying? And you know, I sometimes wish, should I take the gap year? But I feel Morehouse has definitely still given me the best that they can. And I'm still 100% grateful at the end of the day.
Thank you. Pass the ball.
I am privileged to serve as president of a small Bible college and seminary. I'm privileged to serve as the president of a small Bible college and seminary. And one thing which helped us get laptops, things of that nature. But as was mentioned, one of the challenges was access to broadband. One thing I want us to celebrate as National Action Network is my brother Tyleek, who's sitting here. You all may not know this, but Tyleek did a lot of work to push the FCC to make sure we expanded broadband access so that when a challenge like this happens, students are able to access broadband. Funds from Higher Ed Relief Fund. One thing we have to recognize is during this downturn, other institutions that had $1 billion and reserves were able to expand. While we are trying to get students laptops, they're building buildings because they have billions in endowment to live off of. So that's something we also need to address. So when we have crises, accreditation conference, and another HBCU president was sharing that as they had to move students off campus, many of the students didn't want to leave. And they didn't want to leave because they ran from danger. And the HBCU campus was their safety net. And now the crisis was sending them back into danger, and they're saying, I don't know if justice work, because we're rescuing so many to make sure they can endure and live out their full expectancy. So COVID has highlighted a lot of things for HBCUs.
Talik, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think my fellow panelists pretty covered everything, but I think touching on the broadband and internet accessibility thing, I think that was major for folks, because as mentioned, most net is to a cell phone. And so there was that major gap of not having a computer, but also not having access to the internet. And thankfully, along the work that I do as National Youth Director and doing policy work out of our Washington Bureau, working on tech policy, as Pastor Ball mentioned, working with the FCC to expand broadband, and working with a lot of the tech companies to in a weird space of not being able to pay bills because they couldn't go to work. And so where a lot of these folks, when they went home, didn't have the money to even afford it. And so just work within that. But I do think that the major concern was the internet connectivity. And as Pastor Ball mentioned, going back to a place where many students were trying to get away from. As we think about our schools providing shelter, we don't know how many students go to our schools that don't have homes that they live in, that live in shelters. And so that was a major concern, but I'm grateful that our institution stepped up in the midst of danger, in the midst of adversity, and still provided a place of safe haven for our students despite that. So shout out to our schools for being that a home figure for a lot of our students and step.
A minute, so if you have a question, please line up here in the center aisle. But I want to get in one additional question before we go to audience Q&A, and that is, Talik, I'll start with you about student debt. One of the things that, of course, Congressman Scott mentioned, and Dr. Williams, you also noted, was the doubling of the Pell Grant and how important that is. But there's also been a move to try to cancel student debt, and add a bit about that.
Yeah, of course. We understand that student debt is a racial equity issue. Many students, when they go to school, they have this expectancy that if I go get an education, that I can get ahead in life. But for the reality for a lot of students, that's not the case, because you're drowned in student debt trying to pay back. And think a lot of this money that folks are getting when it comes to putting food on the table, keeping the shelter over your head. And so canceling student debt is a way to close the racial wealth gap, and we continue to urge the president that if we can extend student debt repayment from happening, then we can cancel it altogether. So we continue to urge the president to cancel student debt, as mentioned, it's a racial equity issue.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on that?
Now, I was provided the presidents of the university an opportunity to use the funds to cancel debt, and most of our presidents use that if a student had a debt that they owe the institution, they used those funds to cover it, to get them back to zero. And that was a blessing for a lot of students during that time.
Thank you. All right, we're going to try to get to as many questions as we can, a lot of commentary so we can get to as many as we can. Yes.
Thank you so much. First question.
First, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Since HBCU are doing so good, I'm going to say great, do anyone think or that our college will be established here in the North, like a site in New York State?
An HBCU that's established in New York.
Yeah.
All right.
Or in the North.
So, Dr. Williams, we're going to talk about the historic nature of HBCUs. There are predominantly black institutions. In fact, Medgar Evers College is a predominantly black institution, but I think it's important to make the distinction between the HBCU designation. Dr. Williams?
Yeah, the HBCU designation is a designation that was established by Congress in 1965, those instances of educating black students. And so those institutions, so anything going forward, those institutions will be classified as predominantly black institutions versus HBCU. And the HBCU designation is very important because there's funding tied to it, and there's permanent funding coming from the federal government that supports these institutions, as just like is a land grant institution, and just like Tuskegee, to create what I'm hearing you, if you think about creating another institution, you can do it, but it would not be class, it would be a PBI. It would be a predominantly black institution instead of historically black from that perspective.
Great question. Thank you so much.
All right. Good afternoon, brothers. Again, thank you for the panel. My name is Cecil Price III. I'm a Morehouse College sophomore sociology major with a double minor in poli-sci and education from. I want to reiterate that as a Morehouse man, we begin to understand that our community, we tend to funnel our success through whiteness. So I want you guys to give advice to upcoming class 26 students that we no longer have to compare our success to whiteness, that we're not new to this, we're true to this. So please give advice to those who are trying to compare an HBCU to a PWI.
Mindful of this Ralph Lauren thing and the Morehouse connection there. I look at our style, I look at our music. The truth of the matter is they bite off us way more than we bite off them. So maybe we ought to look at ourselves in the mirror and recognize that we are the model and that we are not trying to assimilate to their culture, but rather they are trying to assimilate to our culture.
Applause to Cecil. He just won Senator at Large at Morehouse. You know, he wants to be funny, but it's Senator at Large. Now the beauty of Morehouse that I appreciated was I felt it wasn't as if they were teaching me how to be comfortable in the white area. They just wanted me to be ready for it. You know what I'm saying? There's a difference of just like comforting or changing yourself to be able to fit in. It's more about just like me are going to always tell me, no, you need to be 110%. You always have to look your sharpest. You always got to be, well balanced. We know our 5 wells. Our 5 wells. Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Well traveled, well balanced, well spoken, well dressed, and well read. You know what I'm saying? Those 5 elements that we take into ourselves at Morehouse College. That's what I always tell the students. So if you're class of 26, learn your 5 wells.
Good afternoon. Just want to thank you guys for being here and all that you're contributing. It warms my heart to see this. I have 3 children. My youngest is about to go to college now. I've actually had a front row seat with some of my son's older friends as to how these PWIs treat our kids who are basketball stars. Without going into detail, nothing less than modern day slavery. And it burns me up because I think, gosh, my mother and my grandparents, I know weren't accepted into these schools. That's another story. My youngest, we're actually touring this week for colleging. So what is the best great way to try and get some more funding or scholarships for her at this time? She's an A student, so hopefully.
I would encourage connecting with a lot of the alumni chapters within your local community. A lot of times these schools have local chapters that provide scholarships, but what department they're going for, and set up a meeting with the chair. There may be some funding within there, and connecting with organizations such as Thurgood Marshall College Fund that offer tons of scholarships on their website. So,
yeah, thank you, and yes, I would encourage you to go to tmcf.org. We have 130 scholarship programs that will be on our website, and they're only for students to go to HBCUs. We can't use the money to go to the other side. And so your daughter, in thinking from an academic perspective, all of our HBCUs have academic scholarships they give out. I can talk firsthand from Howard, particular. Their scholarships, they have different tiers that they give out: the presidential scholarship, the chancellor scholarship, the dean's scholarship, and it's an easy process for them. It's clear. You have the GPA, you have full scholarship to go to that particular institution. Same thing with A&T or any of our schools. They have the process will be pretty simple, but I know Howard because I went through it with my boys from that perspective. So I would encourage your daughter to look at the institution's website, but go to our website, tmcf.org, and look at all the scholarship opportunities that we have there, especially if she's a rising senior.
Yes.
I shared that I've had two now matriculate through Morehouse. I remember my oldest son, when he was there, my middle son was in middle school, and they could only wear college sweaters. So, of course, his counselor saw it and said, no, you need a Morehouse sweater. And his counselor bought him a Morehouse sweater. Showed up for PTA, his counselor stops me at the door and says, oh, you're Micah's father. I hear that your son is at Ford. He was an alumni at Morehouse and recognized I've got a son at Morehouse, and all of a sudden that next semester was fully paid at the school. So those alumni are really, really powerful. Definitely get to know them as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question.
One other point: do it early. Apply early. If she's going to be a senior starting this, you will apply in her senior year, like when she starts back.
She's a senior now.
She's okay. Okay.
So it's still not too late, right?
May 1 is the official commitment date for students to decide on whether or not where they're going to go to college. So you still have some time. Okay. But those of you who are thinking about it, do it very, very early.
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, hi. Well, thank you for being here, and it's a very powerhouse weekend. When you mail out, do you still mail out like the CDs and the information about what HBCUs are? Because I have to admittedly say that as a mother of 3, but one who has finished college and my son he's a senior. But due to COVID, he has not returned, and it seems like he's a little discouraged because of his school is in a Republican state. So my question is, one, they say it's not where you start, it's where you finish. So the question is, if he started there and he only has 24 credits remaining, can he finish in an HBCU? Then the second question is, the information that I received from HBCUs at the time I was with my career, plus the London school and everything that was going on, and so do you still send send things like that out? Because if you do, I would like to have some of those sent to me so I can share that with him as an extension of being here. And that could be something that can lead to his encouragement if he's welcome to possibly be an applicant for his senior year.
Yeah, thank you. So the first question is really, I think, an important question because we know there are many students who start college who stop out for many different reasons, committed to trying to get many of those students back and have created really a new initiative to try to encourage students to finish their degree. But Dr. Williams, you were a former college president, so I know that you saw this all the time. What can be done to encourage those students who started their education and stopped out, maybe for financial reasons or other reasons, to finally come back and earn the degree? Because without a degree, right, you paid a lot.
They have programs what they call Recruit Back, and they're trying to get the students back into the institutions. So every last one of our HBCUs will have transfer programs. So your 24 credits, you would have your son or daughter to submit those credits to the institution to evaluate so they don't lose those credits if it came from another four-year institution, regardless of if it's a predominantly white. Those credits still will transfer over, because I would encourage your son or daughter to look at the different websites around. A lot of our schools are not sending out mailers or CDs. They're using a lot of social media to get their word out as it relates to the institution and what you would need to have in order to get in.
We'll get, yes.
Yeah, and so it is a little secret at Morehouse. When Martin Luther King went to our school, he was a C student. When my first semester at Morehouse, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't do that well, and an alumni told me that. So for your son, don't let him be discouraged. You know what I'm saying? Martin Luther King, who was probably the best person to give a speech, failed speech at Morehouse. So for him, he just has to keep on going. You know what I'm saying? Just keep on going. He's gonna make it out.
Thank you. We're running short on time, so I want to get as many questions as we can. So please keep them very brief so we can.
Here representing Memphis, Tennessee. And man, I wanted to know, what is the percentage of African American men in HBCUs? Because I look around this room and I see a few African American men. And what we're doing, we're about to do a call to
the question. What was the question?
Yes. Oh, what is the percentage to African American men in HBCUs? And what can we do to do better to get them?
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
But nationally, we're not doing well, to be honest with you. Just be very candid. Most of our campuses, our African American females are in this. Some campus 70%, and in some cases, 60. If we can get 50-50. That's a rare situation. So we got males back in college in general from that perspective.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Huff, and I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. And I wanted to address the question that you asked earlier about the homelessness, and the children had to return back to where they were running from. What are we doing, and I say we, doing to help with that's going out with, they're giving stimulus checks? Are we giving money to the children that's returning back to poverty so we can make sure they're eating and have a place to live? Because a lot of them didn't have places to live. Thank you.
Anybody want to take that?
Well, I think one, we were definitely pushing each college campus to create those safe havens for students who could not return home. In a lot of the college campuses, as I mentioned, opened up space on their campuses for those students. And even to mention, we see Katrina Jefferson here, who was leading a lot of National Action Network's work. We gave over 1 million meals to people across the country in our respective areas to help feed folks. And so a lot of folks stepped in the gap, but we definitely were pushing schools to keep their doors open, and a lot of them definitely.
Questions, and we'll get to these quickly and before we end.
Hello, my name is Sylvie Bello, and I'm with the Cameroon American Council. I work on African immigration, and HBCUs have been great places for a lot of Africans, as well as Africans who pay international student fees. We have been getting reports that HBCUs are looking to get Ukraine immigrants in for free. My question is, how many HBCUs are part of that work on pushing immigration reform for predominantly Asian students? And we would like to see the same for predominantly African students, specifically immigration relief called Cameroon TPS, which the council, the president...
What was your question? Because he said we have two more people, so...
Yeah, that's my question. So my question is, HBCUs have benefited from African immigrants paying international student fees, yet we do not see HBCUs when it comes specifically Cameroon TPS. Thank you.
Anybody want to take that question? No? So, I mean, again, I think you're raising awareness here, and I think that's really helpful, and it's something that I think maybe we should look into more. So, yes.
Morning, sir. My name is Robert Cordell, and I'm from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. I got a BS degree from Winston-Salem State University, and a school teacher and a substitute teacher for over 45 years. Okay, my question is there any movement to teach our kids how to get a job, how to keep a job, and the power of money?
That's a big question.
I'll try to be very quick. You're Trojan and you're a Ram, both of them. And of the students that we work with in helping them with their professional skills as it relates to, because a large percentage of our students will be classified as first generation and then first generation corporate. So in order to go into corporate America, we do programs designed specifically to help educate our students on the life inside of corporate America. And we have leadership conferences. We have kind of help students integrate and navigate the different processes. So that's part of the program that we do at TMCF, and I would encourage anybody, again, to go to our website, and you'll see some of those programs listed there. We have the largest student leadership conference in the world, and this young man was part of it. He can tell we bring in more than 600 of our HBCU students from all over the country. New York City is going to be this year where we're going to host it. Previously with corporations and companies, and they talk about life skills.
Thank you. Final question.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Chukwuma Garvey Uku. I'm a current student at the Earl G. Graves School of Business at the illustrious Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. I actually am also a representative of Historically Black Wall Street, a company founded on that campus, and those that are creatives and business owners at these HBCUs connect with you all to try to build a partnership to continue to grow the future and lead the world.
Thank you.
For me, I think it's better to always speak directly with the students, because we're right there in the front grounds. We're the ones living in the dorms. We're the ones really trying to creating the experience at the school. So for you, of course, we have some of my brother directly to the students. For me, that's how you could definitely bring more impact.
Anyone else? Pass the ball. Didn't you all enjoy this panel? Let's give them a Big round of applause. You all can do better than that. Big round of applause. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll resume back in this room at 1:30, so you all may take a break now. I encourage you to, we'll be back in this room at 1:30 with our next session.